Correspondent Tom Harwood. Tom, what did you make of that?
Well, apart from the slight connectivity problems with broadband that some of these candidates had, this was really interesting because this was the first sort of public pitch, the first time we've seen these candidates together. Now, they've been husting in a similar way behind closed doors in Parliament for the last few days, but this was a little bit of a preview of the other debates that we're going to see. We're going to see a debate tonight, of course, one on Sunday, one on Monday. This is going to become, we're going to get pretty sick of these faces, but it was interesting seeing those different pitches. Certainly, Tom Tugendhat coming across commanding strong, mentioning the army in every single answer that he gave, but to some extent also sounding potentially more right-wing than people might have thought. Is he leaning in to try and get some of those Braverman votes, perhaps? But also looking at Rishi Sunak, starting the whole conversation with the words, "Hi, everyone," trying to appear, I suppose, more of a friend to people, potentially trying to win over votes that way. I think Penny Mordaunt did appear pretty commanding in how she spoke. She's always been very good at the dispatch box, but there might be some more questions over her policy. Very good at presentation, but when it came to some of those economic questions, she was saying we need to wait for a fiscal event in order to really set out the big brushstrokes in terms of those economic policies. So really interesting there. And then, of course, Liz Truss setting across what is probably the most ideologically free market approach, perhaps Kemi as well, in that pitch. But sadly for Kemi, we didn't hear a lot of what she had to say particularly clearly because that internet connection was not the best. Perhaps all of these candidates need to have a policy for broadband as well as what we heard.
Levelling up people's internet connectivity. And briefly, Tom, I mean, how important are these publicised hustings? Because it's been a lot of horse trading behind the scenes. Will MPs now be looking at what opinion polls might say, what Twitter chat's going to say, what the headlines are going to say about the public appearances now of the candidates?
I think certainly MPs will be watching a lot of these events over the weekend, but also crucially it's the personal conversations that go. Lots of MPs have already made up their minds. I'm not sure we're going to see a lot of switching between these candidates, but ultimately it's the votes of the Attorney General, Suella Braverman, that are up for grabs for the next round. Will people switch between candidates? I'm not sure. It might be that actually for the next round, which is on Monday evening, it might not be all that much of a change. Suella Braverman has endorsed Liz Truss. Most of her votes may go to Liz Truss. It might be fairly easy to predict where it goes. The more interesting round may be on Tuesday or even on Wednesday if it stretches out that long, because then you get the interesting play, because you've got three candidates who are really vying for that final spot. And maybe something will change tonight. Maybe Kemi will have a breakout performance at these debates and things might shift more radically. But I think in order for that to happen, you need to see a real herd move when it comes to the media.
Well, weekend is a long time in politics, and of course we've still got all of the weekend newspaper headlines to look forward to. Tom, thank you ever so much. Well, if you've just joined us, welcome. You're watching We Need to Talk About on GB News with me, Alex Phillips, where we get stuck into the big issues that we need to look at in depth. Nothing is off the table, and I'm not going to cancel anybody for saying what they think. Keeping me company today is former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib, and here's what we've got coming up on the show. I've got a bumper panel of experts on the big issues facing the contenders to be our next Prime Minister: business, health, education, Brexit, foreign affairs and the economy. They'll be giving their take on the runners and riders. But who will come out on top? And I'll bring you the rest of the day's big stories, as well as my pick of the lesser spotted headlines getting me hot under the collar with my agenda. Lots to stick around for, especially if you want to bone up and win all the arguments at this weekend's barbecue. Or maybe you have things to say now. If so, email us gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can join the conversation on Twitter @GBNews. Now, though, it's time for a quick break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Is ex-big shot banger who got us high on handouts, but now wants to give us zip. Could be a false favourite, according to rivals who want to see him sent to the knackers yard. He's being quickly chased down by the bookies' new favourite, the glossy-maned trade minister. But her ex-stable boss says she's a pad nag over hard ground, preferring the going soft, while others worry about a lug-in to the left. Bailing up the inside storms the Foreign Secretary, backed now by some big names, with tipsters saying she's the nap for the win. And at the back, two potential dark horses, both untested in a graded race. The Minister for Equality with the look of eagles and the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, both novice runners, but without the handicap of previous poor form. Who will fall at the next hurdle? The race is well and truly on. Well, to dig through it all, I'm going to be joined by an expert panel today representing all of the topics the leadership candidates should be addressing. I have with me Dr. Alan Mendoza, Executive Director at the Henry Jackson Society, a foreign policy and national security think tank. Jasmine Birtles, personal finance expert and founder of MoneyMagpie.com. Michael Kill, CEO of the Nighttime Industries Association, representing business. Professor James Tooley, Vice-Chancellor at Buckingham University, and NHS GP Dr. David Lloyd. Well, I'm going to start off with you, Alan. Foreign Affairs, who is your backing and why? What are the big issues that we need to be addressing when it comes to global security?
Well, as it happens, all the candidates appear to be solid on, foreign and defence policy. I mean, a number of them have been in the current government, and that's been extremely strong, obviously, over the whole Russia issue, the Ukraine debate. You've seen the China issue unfold over the last few years, everyone being quite tough on that. I would say we've got some specific pledges on defence spending. We want, obviously, to see a strong defence. We can understand we need to spend more on defence, and you've seen Tom Tugendhat and Penny Mordaunt come out with strong lines on that. You've also seen, of course, Liz Truss come out with a strong line on that. I think of the field, the two we know less about on foreign policy are Rishi Sunak and Kemi Badenoch, and I think both of them need to, if you like, unveil what they really think on some of the key issues, because the others have plenty of public forum. So from my perspective, actually any of them in my field will be good for this country, but I would like to hear a bit more from Rishi and Kemi.
Let's now go to you, Professor James Tooley. Let's talk about education. It hasn't been a big topic of discussion so far in this contest, but it really ought to be.
Yes, and in higher education, the issues that I would want the candidates to be talking about and looking at, first of all, would be the student loans company. The student loans system is unaffordable. We've got to look at some way of reforming it. I can't see any of the candidates talking about that, and that's something that needs to be done. The academic freedom, free speech, on the other hand, is something that people are talking about. And here, of course, Kemi and Liz Truss, I think, come across most strongly. Kemi Badenoch is very good on the whole thing of free speech, academic freedom. She would be the one most of all.
Oh, we seem to have lost James there. Let's see if we can get him back. But thankfully, I'm joined by lots of other people. So, Jasmine, let's go to you. As a personal finance expert, is anybody really making the right noises when it comes to the economy and basically how to get us through this cost of living crisis?
Yes, my favourite really here is Kemi Badenoch. I think she's the one that's been making the loudest noises when it comes to tax cuts in particular. Of course, Rishi Sunak has a handicap here because he's actually been running the economy, and a lot of people could point at all sorts of things that he's done, particularly increasing taxes. He's brought in, I think, 12 extra taxes in his time, many of them stealth. Personally, I think he would struggle, frankly, to show his credentials as somebody who could actually run the economy properly. Liz Truss is all right. I think she's pushing her credentials as having been in the Treasury. I'm not sure, frankly, that matters a great deal, but I think she is interested in cutting taxes. Penny Mordaunt, I suspect, wouldn't, not as much as the others. So she's down pretty much at the bottom, in my view.
And Dr. David Lloyd, the NHS, we haven't really heard a lot about that, and yet it's currently on its knees. Record backlogs. We all know it needs something to change, whether it's reform or investment. Has anybody made the right sort of pledges that would make you think they're going to be the people to take this in hand?
I think you're absolutely right. I think the NHS has not been mentioned on purpose because of the tremendous problems we're having, the enormous waiting lists, the terrible backlogs in the emergency departments, and the threat of COVID still going on. So I think it is a very difficult subject for potential leaders to talk about. But if you ask me to say the person that I think seems to understand it better, of course, the obvious answer is Rishi Sunak, because he's the one that has been slightly more careful with promising tax cuts and small government and lower taxes. The last thing that the NHS needs is lower taxes, because it poses an existential threat to the NHS. And it enables these enormous American mega corporations to take over the NHS like they're doing stealthily at the moment. So I am very worried from all the candidates. But if you ask me to lay it on the line, I think Rishi is the safest pair of hands, although, of course, he has a green card and so may understand American mega corporations slightly better than I do.
Good points, James. Michael, I'm going to come to you now because they're all talking about growth, aren't they? The economy is in tatters and they're saying the important thing to do is growth, growth, growth. But some people are saying they're going to cut corporation tax. Rishi Sunak saying, well, now is not the time to do that. And a lot of these people, 3 of them at least, were in cabinet and were part of the conspiracy that basically brought a lot of British business to its knees. Where do you stand? Who would you back?
I think it's been very... I represent an industry sharpest end of the pandemic and potentially the most compromised in many respects in terms of cost inflation. So at the moment, I think the judgment is still out over some of the details that we're trying to find. As you can appreciate, Rishi has taken quite a hit in terms of confidence because he's already been in that position, and we've seen some of the outputs. A lot of our industry are looking for some breathing space financially so that they recoup their position. They're being hit from both sides in terms of the consumer having less disposable income, but also an industry where we're seeing cost of living or cost of business operations going through the roof, almost 30 to 40% increase in costs. So we're starting to lose business. It needs decisive action. It needs someone who's going to come in and take some very clear, direct action in the short term so that we can start to recoup and drive towards growth, investment. And some of these are going to come in things like deregulation, planning and licensing easement, which is going to be a big part of it. It's not just about financial relief. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of our industry on a broader spread, not just the financial position. But we still get to hear some of the details and direction of travel from these candidates.
Yeah, Michael, thank you. Thank you to the rest of the panel. Don't go anywhere because I want to get your thoughts in a short while. I'm now going to go to my studio guest of the day, former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib. Ben, as we're going by topics at the moment, what better for you to talk about than Brexit?
Yeah.
Do you trust any of them to really price in Brexit dividends and use these newfound freedoms that the voters have asked for?
Well, the problem all of them have got is that we haven't actually delivered the form of Brexit that would allow them to exploit those freedoms. They talk about newfound freedoms, but actually we've signed into a level playing field with the EU. We can't have a free hand with state aid. We can't have a free hand with employment law. We can't have a free hand with competition law. And most importantly, and it's quite interesting hearing Lord Frost, chastise Penny Mordaunt for her apparent lack of attention to detail. You know, we have Lord Frost banging the drum for ditching net zero, but the deal we've done with the EU ties us into non-regression on net zero. So if Lord Frost is listening, is that the camera that's on me? If Lord Frost is listening, he needs to get his head across the detail because he has committed this country by international treaty into net zero. We cannot regress from it. And what I'd like to hear from the candidates is how are they going to deregulate? With all these constraints that the Trade and Cooperation Agreement has put on us, how are they going to deregulate? How are they going to motor this economy forward? So that's the first thing. And the other thing, which I was very disappointed to hear, I appreciate it was a set of questions and answers rather than a debate, but Northern Ireland didn't come up once. The United Kingdom faces an existential threat to its existence. The EU is actively trying to capture Northern Ireland economically by putting a border down the Irish Sea, and we, as a government, the United Kingdom as a country, has stood back and just watched that happen for the last 2.5 years. And none of the candidates said how they were going to address it. Liz Truss is potentially the best versed in this subject, and she should have come out this morning and she should have said, I championed the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill to neuter the protocol, but I tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, if you elect me to be leader of the party, I will immediately invoke Article 16 and suspend it. I'm going to bring Northern Ireland back into the United Kingdom immediately. That's what she needs to say. And we need to take that Brexit fight to the EU, bring Northern Ireland back in, ditch the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, get our true governance freedoms back, and then we can have a nimble, independent, fighting fit United Kingdom.
Ben, thank you. I've seen you at work in the European Parliament and you're nonetheless ferocious right now. Thank you all for your opinions. You're with GB News on TV and radio. I know what you're going to do. You're going to email in and say Ben for Prime Minister. Sadly, he's not standing. But coming up, we will be continuing this conversation about the Tory leadership candidates who would be the best person to lead our country and who might fall at the next hurdle. First, though, let's have a little look at the news headlines.
It's 2:33. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The remaining 5 candidates in the Conservative leadership race have outlined their plans to tackle the cost of living, the war in Ukraine and the housing crisis. In a warm-up ahead of tonight's first televised debates, Rishi Sunak, Penny Mordaunt, Liz Truss, Tom Tugendhat and Kemi Badenoch all took part in a public hustings. Meanwhile, eliminated Attorney General Suella Braverman has given her support to Liz Truss, saying she's the candidate to unleash the opportunities of Brexit. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the country needs new government, not a new Tory leader.
We don't fear any of the candidates because the change that the United Kingdom needs is not a change at the top of the Conservative Party. We've already had 12 years of failure from the Conservative Party. The change we need, the fresh start we need for Britain, is a change of government.
The family of Archie Battersby say they may appeal against the latest High Court ruling that doctors can lawfully stop his life support treatment. It follows a review of evidence at a hearing in London today. The 12-year-old suffered a catastrophic brain injury in April. Last month, a High Court judge ruled that he was brain-stem dead. The mother of a British aid worker who was being held in the Russian-occupied region of eastern Ukraine has confirmed he's died. Paul Yuri was captured in late April and was charged with so-called mercenary activities by separatists in the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic. The Foreign Office has said it's urgently seeking clarification from the Russian government on the reports. And the Met Office has issued its first red extreme heat warning for parts of England on Monday and Tuesday. The highest alert means there's a danger to life amid soaring temperatures. Tuesday is expected to be the hottest day, with a chance temperatures could reach a record-breaking 40 degrees. TV online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. It's back to Alex with we need to talk about in just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. You're with Alex Phillips on GB News. We're going to continue our bumper panel discussion on the contenders to be the next Prime Minister. Still with me are Dr. Alan Mendoza, Executive Director at the Henry Jackson Society, a foreign policy and national security think tank. Jasmine Birtles, personal finance expert and founder of MoneyMagpie.com. Michael Kill, CEO of the Nighttime Industries Association. Professor James Tooley, Vice-Chancellor at Buckingham University. NHS GP Dr. David Lloyd. And my studio guest for the day is businessman and ex-Brexit Party MEP, Ben Habib. I'm going to go back to you first, James, because we lost you a bit earlier at the beginning. Now, looking at the candidates, there's a mixture there of those who went to state school and those who were privately educated, those who went to Oxbridge and those didn't. How important do you think that is when it comes to someone outlining the education policy for the future?
I don't think it's important at all. I think anyone who's been to state school or private school can understand the alternatives. Anyone who's been to Oxbridge can also understand what it's like to go to another university. So I'm not worried about that so much. What I am concerned about is the candidate's position on what you could loosely call the culture wars, because they're the things that most affect education. And of the candidates, then, the one I'm most worried about would be Penny Mordaunt. I'm not quite sure she is clear about trans issues and gender issues, and her book, Greater Britain After the Storm, does have some very questionable things in it that I would worry about if she was in charge, as it were, of the culture wars. The best candidates on that side then would be Kemi Badenoch and of course Liz Truss. They are to be trusted in this. They know what a woman is. They are aware of the importance of fighting the culture wars for education and the importance, on the other side, of free speech and academic freedom. So Liz Truss and Kemi would be my favourites there, and Penny my least favourite candidate.
Give your candor, Jasmine. I'm going to come back to you on economics. The pitch that everyone seems to be trying to make, the main battleground so far of this campaign. Who's your winner and who should be the loser?
Well, you know, the problem here, I think, is, as so many people have said, honestly, it doesn't matter who we have there. A lot of people have been saying it's going to be the same, whatever anybody, whoever we have, because there's a juggernaut that we have going towards probably a recession, certainly more inflation, and it seems beyond most of the candidates, if I'm honest. However, again, I think probably Kemi Badenoch and Liz Truss would be the ones I would look to make the hard decisions, because there are going to be some really hard decisions that will have to be made. I don't think Penny could do it. I'm not sure about Tom Tugendhat, possibly. But Rishi Sunak, I haven't been impressed by his behaviour, if you like, over the last couple of years. So I wouldn't put him in the race.
And Alan, foreign policy, it's sort of slipped off the agenda now. We've got our own dramas back at home, but plenty of drama still going on overseas. For you, who is the person who's most hawkish when it comes to geopolitics, who'd be our best leader?
Well, I'm not sure it has slipped completely off the agenda. I mean, there's a small war in Ukraine we're currently participating in and major challenges that are linked to the cost of living crisis and such like. But if we look at where we're going, if you're looking at what the UK needs from its foreign and defence policy, it needs the global Britain outlook. It needs to have a strong defence force, and it needs to be robust in its approach to dictators. And if you look at the two candidates who consistently have displayed that, Liz Truss as Foreign Secretary and Tom Tugendhat, have been on this for many, many years in this sort of way. Penny Mordaunt did have a spell as Defence Secretary, of course. There was no issues there to worry about as such, but she's been off that agenda for a while, and we just don't know enough from Rishi Sunak and Kemi Badenoch. Their portfolios have never crossed into foreign and defence policy, and we need to hear from them on these subjects if they wish to be considered as effective foreign and defence policy prime ministers.
Yeah, and David, when it comes to health, we spoke about this a bit before the break, and you made the very important point of the effect of the economy and how we fund our NHS. And when it comes to trade, who we let into the NHS. Is there someone, when it comes to this big issue, that you'd be confident in backing to be our next Prime Minister?
I'm afraid I see them all with the same eye, I'm afraid. They are all committed to an approach to driving down the quality of the NHS. And of course, the worse the NHS gets, the more it becomes a likely target for introducing different ways of providing health services. And we edge ever towards a privatized health service where we will be spending a larger and larger amount of our GDP on health in a very inefficient way, providing inefficient and unequal care. So I'm afraid I don't have a particular candidate who I would push forward. As I said, Rishi Sunak seems to be the sensible one when it comes to taxation. But I just don't want to see the NHS go like NHS dentistry has gone, where people are literally pulling out their own teeth. I'd hate to see general practice becoming just a call centre organisation and hospitals being sold off to private organisations. The fact is the NHS provides a fantastic service for business. American companies are saddled with providing healthcare insurance for their employees. Every company that works in the UK has the fantastic advantage of having an NHS that provides that safety net for patients so that they can thrive as businesses and know that their workforce are going to come to work healthy. So a thriving NHS is fantastic for business. A privately run NHS is fantastically bad for business.
David, thank you ever so much. And thank you to the rest of my panel today. Dr. Alan Mendoza, Executive Director at the Henry Jackson Society, Jasmine Birtles, personal finance expert, Professor James Tooley, Vice-Chancellor at Buckingham University, and NHS GP, Dr. David Lloyd. Fascinating insights there. Well, Ben, what's interesting is I was sort of trying to keep a tally on my notepad of the way votes were going in this panel. And the people who got the most votes were those who aren't in the top three. It seems to me that the public are probably not going to get the Prime Minister that they want.
No, and that's a very interesting observation. It's almost like the parliamentary party has lost touch with the members' base. And, you know, we saw this with Brexit. I don't want to go back to Brexit, but Parliament was in contempt of the people over Brexit. And you've got now parliamentarians choosing candidates who are not really the candidates that the people want to see. The people, if I may be so bold as to say this, would have loved to have seen Suella up there, you know, but she's out. I'd love to see Kemi Badenoch up there. Certainly I prefer Liz Truss to Penny Mordaunt or Rishi Sunak. And, you know, Rishi Sunak embodies everything that's gone wrong with the Conservative Party. You know, he talks about not being prepared to cut taxes until inflation is under control. Well, inflation has been under control until recently for the last 11 years. And yet we've got a taxation level which is the highest it's been since World War II. How did that happen? His strapline for his campaign is rebuilding the economy. Well, that's an admission of failure. His premise for being elected leader is to fix the problems he's created. You know, if you vote for Rishi Sunak, it's continuity catastrophe. Penny Mordaunt hasn't got a clue about the economy. I've heard her interviewed on it. She goes absolutely silent. She's looking to dodge the question, so she hasn't got a clue. The strongest candidate here, I think, on the economy, and let's face it, the economy is the most important issue, is Liz Truss. Liz Truss is, you know, she's the most experienced minister, actually. She, with the exception of Rishi, who's got really bad experience, you know, you've got Liz Truss, who understands the economy, I think. She understands Brexit. She has the tools at her disposal to deliver what we need. And so I think by a process of elimination, Liz needs to be up there.
Wow, it's not exactly gushing praise. But let's talk a bit more about this, because, you know, one thing that people say about Liz Truss is when it comes to charisma, perhaps she is found wanting. And one thing I've got from watching that hustings is all of them seem to fit that. I could almost hear the sort of soft words of spin doctors in their ears saying, oh, here's a mantra, repeat it, repeat it. I didn't get a sense of anyone's personality or any sort of glimmer of authenticity.
None of them were speaking their minds. They were all speaking to what they felt they needed to say. And that's distressing. And I'm not going back to Suella again, but Suella spoke her mind. And rather unwisely, the night before Boris Johnson was knifed, she admitted that she'd run for the candidacy. And I know that came across to a lot of people as kind of tin-eared, but that was Suella, because asked a question, she just gave a straight answer. And we're not getting that from these candidates. They're all playing...
Kemi may be a little bit...
Well, even with Kemi in that interview just now, I felt Kemi was feeling... It just didn't feel natural. The way she was speaking wasn't natural. Rishi's the most polished, but I don't want a polished politician. I want a politician who's got convictions. We've had 12 years of mediocre centre-left Tory automatons. What we need is a new Prime Minister with a genuinely new vision. Not, oh, well, we'll look at taxes when inflation is under control. We'll rebuild the economy when we get an opportunity to do. But right now, we're really not going to do too much. I don't want that. I want someone who's got a really impressive vision for the UK and feels it. And I didn't get that impression from anyone.
Well, were they right to get rid of Boris? I mean, you know, people might say that there's something about Boris that at least he was a character and he had his back against the ropes and he could have potentially turned things around. Do you have high hopes for what follows him?
They were absolutely right to get rid of Boris. Boris was elected on a misrepresentation to the British people. His oven-ready deal, which I think you described as something that would get smellier... No, you described it as a cheese that would get smellier and smellier the more people looked at it. And that's what's happened with Boris. He was elected on a false premise, and his premiership was riddled with falsities. He had to go. And... you know, Rishi Sunak said we're going to try and do something that no other government has done before, which is to be re-elected for the 5th time. I don't think they're going to achieve it. Unless there's a radical change in thinking in the Conservative Party, they shed their sort of socialist clothing. They understand that low taxation leads to growth and a better NHS, by the way. You don't get a better NHS by taxing the hell out of the economy and killing the goose that lays the golden egg. And that's what's happening at the moment. We need lower taxes, we need lower regulation, they go hand in hand, and we need to supercharge the economy. And if we can do that, the Exchequer will benefit automatically, and then you can look after the NHS, then you can look after all government programmes much more easily. You don't tax your way to prosperity.
No more fluffy, centrist flim-flam, I think is what you're trying to say. Well, strident thoughts there. If you have strident thoughts too, do get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, the High Court has ruled on the case of Archie Battersby today, deciding that the 12-year-old's life support treatment can be ended. Specialists at the Royal London Hospital have said it's highly likely Archie is dead, but his parents, Holly Dance and Paul Battersby, disagree. Archie suffered brain damage after being found with a ligature over his head back in April. Well, our London reporter Alice Porter has the latest from the Royal Courts of Justice.
The family of Archie Battersby reacted very angrily to the decision from Mr. Justice Hayden. They said it was only for God to decide what should happen to their son. They very much say his heart is still beating and want him to die what they say is a natural death, and that is not have his ventilator switched off, which is what Mr. Justice Hayden has said the hospital are able to do. He said that Archie Battersby is completely unresponsive and has no prospect of recovery. He also described that the treatment he's receiving, the ventilator that he is dependent on, as intrusive, burdensome and intense. We also heard in court that Archie Battersby has become very malnourished. He's become anemic as well and has problems with both constipation and diarrhea because of the trauma he received to his head. And therefore, Mr. Justice Hayden said that continuing treatment in this way would not be in Archie's best interest. It would deprive him of his autonomy, and it said that continuing this treatment in this way would only protract his death whilst being unable to prolong his life. The family of Archie Battersby say they will be appealing this decision.
Alice Porter, our GB News reporter there. It's a story we've been following closely here at GB News and will continue to do so. Now, before I scuttle off for the weekend to freeze my bath towels and prepare for solar apocalypse, my palms are sweaty and I'm already getting hot under the collar about the stories in the papers barely getting a glimpse, but worth letting some steam off about. So grab your folded fan, mop your brow with a moist kerchief and take a long, deep breath. It's time for my agenda. Well, when it comes to political hullabaloo, anything we can do, Italy does better. Boris and his slice of COVID cake was nothing compared to Berlusconi's bunga bunga. Well, now, amidst an economic crisis that makes ours look like a tough week for Richard Branson, Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi has resigned, threatening to engulf the entire Eurozone in flames. The former European Central Bank head honcho, lauded as gluing the currency back together during the last crisis, has freaked out the markets with his swift exit, just when Italy needs to reassure lenders as their mountain of debt hits $2.5 trillion. Italy's president told his prime minister he's not allowed to go anywhere, but the monumental scrap in Rome between the ruling coalition parties could see elections called at a crucial moment. With interest rates going through the roof, meaning Italy is struggling to finance its basket case economy, a default could be big enough to bring down the rest of the Eurozone. Forget Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The new biggest obstacle to climate change is the vape craze, sending kids at school totally doolally across the country. With 2 chucked away every second in Blighty, 10 tons of lithium needed to make batteries for electric cars is ending up in landfill. Along with most of the world's net zero policies, it seems, just as the planet bursts into flames, Greta will be skimming our rubbish tips with a band of feral school kids, faster than you can say climate crisis. Now, I could have sworn one headline clicked me into a portal to 1997 when I read that Blair wanted to bring in ID cards. You've got to admire the man for his tenacity when it comes to his unrealised headline policy. For over 20 years later, he's back, demanding the introduction of digital identification in the UK for every man, woman and child. And you know what? I'm actually with the Tonester. Right now, we have no sensible way of documenting who's here and who can use the NHS, yet hordes of illegal migrants are entering the country every day. The fact we don't have a digital ID system, especially after Brexit, when we can allegedly now control our borders, is crackers. And all those radical libertarians on Twitter angrily tweeting about our freedoms. Dude, you're online. Pretty sure China, Iran and Russia know exactly where you are. And what fresh hell is this? Rumour has it a film is being made based on some book by some human who credits herself with booking the right royal dolt Prince Andrew for that Newsnight interview. Probably only had to wave a jar of caviar at him. And even worse, Hugh Grant is tipped to play the Puffy Prince. Yep, the man who paid a prostitute 37 quid for his services in a car 20 years ago and ended up getting arrested for it, but who now loves ironically moralising over privacy and integrity. It's a triple vomit whammy of self-important Beeb folk wanting accolades just for doing their jobs. Hugh Grant, yet again, playing a morally vacuous, pompous prig. And the problem prince, whose very existence is a blight on our nation's reputation. Gross. Well, that's about it for me now. Join me again for We Need to Talk About on GB News at the same time next week, 2 o'clock. Coming up, it's the briefing with Darren McCaffrey. Oh, it's not Darren, it's Arlene because it's a Friday. First, though, it's time for the weather forecast, and we all know it's set to be a scorcher. Hope you've got your barbecues ready. Bye-bye, and I'll see you next week. Have a great weekend.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A fine, sunny but increasingly hot weekend will lead into some extreme heat for the early part of next week. The Met Office have issued warnings, extreme heat warnings for Sunday into Tuesday. High pressure is building in. That's creating the rising temperatures. But at the moment, at least, there's weather fronts sitting across parts of the north, bringing quite a lot of clouds and some outbreaks of rain across northwest England. A few showers coming into Scotland, the far northwest turning drier and brighter. A cloudier day for the Midlands and southern parts of England, but still quite a lot of sunshine along the south coast. And it's pretty warm out there. Temperatures, though, just getting into the mid to maybe high 20s. Fairly cool, though, with the cloudier weather further north and some showers around. However, temperatures are going to be ticking up both by day and by night as we go through the weekend. This evening, a few showers lingering over parts of northeast England before steadily fading away. For many, it'll turn into a dry night and